Today's episode of Why Music Matters is sponsored by Buffalo Spree magazine. From the start, Buffalo Spree has been a champion of Western New York's arts community, with every issue showcasing the best of Western New York. What's on stage, on view, in the clubs, and in the concert halls. Pick up the latest issue to get a closer look, or visit buffalospree.com.
If it can be healing for them, if it can take them to another place for a moment, if it can relieve some pain, if it can give some hope, if it can cause them to ask questions that they need to ask that maybe they haven't been asking.
Yeah.
Subconscious wants to.
Yeah.
Maybe music can open up that door to the subconscious and they can have that connection.
We've all seen it happen repeatedly.
Yes.
So that's to continue.
That's where it fits for me. Hello, music lovers. Welcome to Why Music Matters, a podcast where we examine the power and influence that music can wield in our lives. I'm your host, Jeff Miers. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome my friend, the singer, songwriter, guitarist, producer, and band leader, David Michael Miller. Lovers of live music in Western New York know David as leader of the Southern soul band Miller and the Other Sinners, the former co-guitarist and vocalist with the great Dive House Union, through his work with the Campbell Brothers, and as the man behind such stellar albums as Poison Sipped and Rise. I also know him as a deeply talented and thoughtful man who is a generous musical mentor, a guy with a serious work ethic, and a true seeker who views his life in music as a quest with spiritual aspects. Miller and the Other Sinners have just released a new album, Thieves and the Breadline, and I chatted with David about the album's significance in his ongoing musical journey, about his belief that engaging the imagination plants the seeds for empathy, and why music continues to matter so much to him in his life. If you're listening to this in Western New York, in the Buffalo area, on Thursday, June 20th, you're in luck, because Miller and the Other Sinners will be playing 2 sets of music at the new Harbor Walk venue, right on Buffalo's waterfront, directly across from the lighthouse. Beautiful spot to hear some beautiful music. Thanks for joining us today. Take it away, Dave. Hey everybody, welcome to Why Music Matters. A very special one for me today. My dear friend, one of my favorite songwriters, singers, and guitar players. Not just in Western New York, but kind of anywhere. David Michael Miller, welcome to the podcast, brother. Hey man, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's good to have you here. It's an exciting time for you because you're celebrating the release of this outstanding new record, Thieves and the Breadline.
Yeah, man.
Which, for everyone listening, is just a beautiful blend of Southern soul and blues and funk and rock, R&B, all that. All those?
We put it all in a blender.
It's all in there. It just sounds like soulful music, Love the record. We've talked about it a bit, but I wanted to get into it by going back a little bit further, because what we do here, with this podcast is like try to figure out why are you and I. First of all, our friendship is born from music, right?
Absolutely.
It's a deep and lengthy one now. Why are we here talking? How did we get here? Why does it continue to be such a guiding principle in our lives?
Yeah.
So for you,
It's life.
I know there's a lot there, but when did it start? When did you go, all right? And when did you find out that that was going to come out of your mouth when you tried to sing?
Gosh. Well, I mean, I started, music was just a part of my life at an early age because I grew up, in a very religious household.
Yeah.
My grandfather had a church here over near Canisius College. He had a radio show. He was an Italian Pentecostal preacher.
Wow.
And so I think, I heard rumors that I was singing a hymn at like 3 or 4 years old on his radio program, right? So, and, he had musicians come through and play at his church that would come through Buffalo, and they always had music. So music was always just around. My parents were kind of like a folk duo. And so my dad had
news to me.
My dad, with his 12-string Ovation and my mom, and they would, sing kind of, church stuff, for the most part, but it was, very folk style, and he taught me my first, 3 chords when I got to guitar, because actually guitar was not my first instrument.
What was?
Piano.
Good.
Piano. So I learned first on piano, then started playing guitar around the same time that I started playing sax. So it was like 5th grade. And, he taught me a few chords, and then, I just kind of, I immediately started writing songs, and of course at first it was all very, good religious Christian music, right? Because that was my entire
the tradition
context.
you were coming from.
But I remember us always having the radio on in the car. And I remember hearing everything. I remember hearing Bill Withers. I remember hearing B.B. King. I remember hearing all the 70s kind of yacht rock kind of stuff.
Which were genius tunes, like in terms of composition.
Absolutely.
You can really hear it now.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember my parents had some vinyl, and I remember them having and I can't remember which one it was, but, a big Chicago album,
yeah.
And so there were the horns, and so I just had, music was just all around me all the time, and heavily involved with it in school as well, and bands and things like that. So, it seemed pretty early on, especially in my early teens, that this was going to be a thing. I was part of like talent shows and things like that. And, when we'd do the, youth camp, I would be up there playing at some point, wrote our senior class song, stuff like that. One of them, we had 2. And so, it just seemed like that was the trajectory, but my mind was completely in the Christian music world. Yeah. And I actually did I went to Houghton College. My mom worked there and was in the music program there, more for like composition. So I learned a lot of theory and comp and stuff like that there. Yeah. But I did an internship in Nashville. And actually, my now wife, Laura, who I was dating at the time, she did it with me. We both went down because we thought this was the future, right?
Do you think you were going to stay there?
Well, we thought it would probably be a big part of it. Mm-hmm. And so, and we loved Nashville. Of course, this was a long time ago.
Yeah. It's a different Nashville than it was.
Yeah, absolutely. But, it really disillusioned me a bit. Yeah. I just saw all the corporateness, and I remember being in Omni Studio, which has done a ton of records.
Legend.
And I was in there with Phil Nash, who was laying keyboard tracks. He's, pretty well-known producer. He was laying keyboard tracks and had me rap masters for this young up-and-coming artist by the name of Stephen Curtis Chapman, who's won all sorts of Dove Awards and stuff, right?
Tons.
And meanwhile, a band called Whiteheart and Dan Huff were recording in the back studio, and so I'm in this whole thing, but I kept coming back to just the corporateness of it, and then we were very much in love, and we were planning on getting married, and then we had a little surprise because we found out we were pregnant with Josh. But in the Christian world, that's not necessarily a good testimony. So I pretty much figured I had ruined everything. And that began me moving away from music, really. I did it on the side as a little passion, but I couldn't be that guy anymore because I'd let everybody down and I couldn't go out into the Christian world, and there was no other world at the time for me. So so things kind of got backed up and bottled up for quite a few years.
Wow. So that's heavy stuff, dude.
That's a lot in there.
So that world is a strict one.
Yeah, certain traditions, and the tradition that we were kind of in, you just really, you don't go play in bars. You don't even go hang around at bars. There's no
secular crossover going on.
If you're going to do your music, I think that's why when I did meet the Campbell Brothers later and was able to sit and talk to Derek,
coming out of a strong church tradition,
we shared a lot of common stories. But so that just wasn't. But I kept writing. I always had ideas. I always kept writing songs. Even when I took a position later in a church as like a worship leader, I'd write a big chunk of our music that we did, or I'd write interludes, or I'd mash up something that I wrote with something traditional.
So it was never abandoned.
It was never abandoned. It was just just kind of put on the back burner.
And family things took over that.
Listen, we had both boys, and I started I had several different jobs, learning different things. I worked for Andy Glansman, who owns the Wellsville Creative Arts Center. At the time, he owned Northern Lights Candle Company. That's kind of what he's famous for, and just a brilliant creative mind. And he taught me so much, software programming, graphics. I learned everything that I've took into all my other occupations, really, from him. And from that standpoint, I ended up starting my own business, because working in the church, they couldn't really pay me much. I was making a couple $100 a week, had a place to stay, So I had there's a little bit more to the story there, because Mark Winsick?
Oh yeah, very well.
So Mark, at the time, he had a studio in North Collins, and I had written a bunch of songs, and they were kind of grunge style. And I wanted to.
You were in your Cornell phase?
Cornell phase? I'm still in my.
Aren't we all?
He's forever my hero. Yeah. Absolutely. But I ended up writing these tunes, and I just wanted to record them for my kids, and they could hand them to their friends or whatever. I didn't know. And he was kind of going through a change in his life, and he needed a place to stay, and I offered him like a room in our home. And he said, well, why don't I give you some studio time? And I'm like, oh, that'd be great. And so I laid all this stuff down. Me and a friend just kind of tracked it all. And Mark helped just kind of put it together. That ended up getting picked up, bizarre coincidence, by a friend handed it to an independent artist that was on tour from Nashville. He put it out there. We got radio play, didn't even know. That ended up becoming a little record deal with a Christian record label, Mammoth Studios, which was down in Dansville, New York. We put out an album called Sunflower Child, which I'll have to get you a copy of sometime.
I need to hear this.
And
so was it heavy Christian music?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was Seattle influenced stuff. We recorded it in Audio Magic, and
Amazing.
Finished it in that studio down there. Their kind of production studio, but we recorded in Audio Magic. And that album got, all sorts of airplay. We were getting the same rotation as like DC Talk on certain stations. Didn't know at the time. So that kind of kept the fires kind of, burning, but still nothing that I could really do much with, And then we kind of disbanded, and I slowly kind of withdrew from the church because things just stopped making sense to me. And not at the beginning, it was the corporateness and the structure, and why are we raising money for a parking lot when we have kids in our neighborhood that don't get breakfast? Stuff like that just stopped making sense to me. And then from there, the questions just kept compounding to where the heathen that I am now. But I did get a job in there because of that band and that that little kind of indie Christian thing with Eastco Pro Media, which was Holt Vaughn. I don't know if you know that name.
Yeah.
So I walked in there with a live recording that I needed to
a lot
do.
I didn't know, Dave.
Yeah. I had a live recording that I wanted to produce, and their graphics guy, and I was kind of in a last minute thing. And the graphics guy was out sick, and he goes, well, can you lay it out? He goes, do you know Quark and Adobe, all these programs? I'm like, yeah, because I'd learned from
Quark,
Andy Glanzman.
oh my God.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
Quark.
I remember.
And I went in, laid out the album, and he came and looked at it, and he goes, you want a job? So I started working for him, and then that led into my own company because he was farming multimedia projects out and a website, and I figured I can learn that. So I learned it and started doing it, and then I had a company and had 13 people working for me at one point.
Wow, that's a big company.
Yeah, well, we did some pretty substantial projects, software, web software stuff, which I still do on the side today to make the mortgage payment.
Keep gas in the tour bus.
Absolutely.
Wow. So I think we're getting up to around the time of the beginning of Dive House Union.
Yeah, pretty close, because I had, after I kind of moved out of the church, started moving out of the church, I actually started up a couple open mics, one at Clarence Center Coffee Company and one at Spot Coffee down on Delaware and Chippewa, and got introduced to just a world full of wonderful people with different ideas. And I mean, we were stacking 18 people up downtown to try to get them through. And I'm playing bass behind people like Vinny DeRosa. Yeah. Vinny used to come out as a young dude, and my son would play percussion behind him, and I'd play bass. Yeah. And then I kind of started this little band called Beautiful Bones, and it had my son Josh in it, Nick Peterson, who did the artwork for this, which we'll talk about. And I had Mike DeSanto played guitar for me for a while. Crit jumped in and played some stuff with me. I had Jim Enger on keys.
Amazing player.
That's where I met Barry Arbogast. Barry started jamming with us as well. And then, my son at the time was 17 and, turning kind of in that age range. And he's like, yeah, I want to gig every weekend, man. And I'm like, I want to gig like 8 times a week.
Exactly.
And so
just different place.
I know. And so, for the sake of the friendship and the relationship that we had as father and son, we just put the band to bed. And I had subbed a couple times for Todd Eberwein Band. And so I, had a conversation with them, and they said, man, we'd love for you to come on and be that guy. And I said, I'd love to be part of what you're doing. And that morphed into Dive House Union. And I think that's around the time that we met.
Yeah, definitely. It was still a new project when I met you the first time I heard it. And that band, well, let's talk about this sort of as much as you're comfortable with.
Sure.
I'm going to refer to it as your expanding worldview and your emotional and intellectual evolution, and spiritual evolution. You're moving away from this sort of proscribed Christian music world toward what we'll call a more secular music world.
Sure.
Is there any language I'm using that you don't like?
Oh no,
set me straight.
No, it's all good. I mean, I see the world, kind of a little bit more like, I mean, that's how we have to describe it. I feel like life is sacred, so it's all sacred.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's really not. But yeah, I mean, things, I just started questioning, and, I've studied the Bible intensely. I was a youth pastor and assistant pastor. Not that I went to school originally for that, but I did do some schooling when I started working with youth at a church. And, but I've, grown up, and I've had pastors as parents and grandparents, and it's just been a big part of my life. So when I really started questioning things that I just never really, I always had shoved to the side, because I just figured, well, I just don't understand, or or there's probably more to it. I didn't acknowledge the contradictions that are blatantly there. I didn't acknowledge the immorality of actions that are prescribed to said deity. And when you start to kind of unravel that stuff, you see at the very least that the story of this deity is an emperor with no clothes, and that was a scary couple years for me, because
it'd been a bedrock for a big part of your life.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I just it was scary for me to express those doubts. And of course they call it deconstruction, it was deconstructing. But of course at the time there was none of that. I didn't know any of those terms or anything. I just knew that I was going through this, and I just could not deny these questions and things that were in front of my face anymore. And not, I had to understand, I had to kind of go back and say, well, how do I redefine my experiences? I had these transcendent moments. Well, how does the human brain work? Like now we do a show and I get it, right? Because we are all there experiencing this thing together. Yeah. And, when we start singing Better Times, Better Days, and people from the new record, and people are singing along even though they never really heard it, and we have this moment of unison and
universality.
And then you go, well, oh, that was that. You know what I mean? I mean, the themes maybe were different, but the experience really is just this human experience. Yeah. It's not no religion has a corner on these.
Nobody owns that.
No. This is just part of what the magic, the sacredness of being human. And so, that I kind of, I consider myself kind of now agnostic, atheist in the sense that I don't know. I couldn't say that there isn't, but I can definitively say that if what's prescribed in the tradition that I was brought up in, if this is who this is, you say that this is, from this deity is, I really have no problem standing in front of him at the end of time and going, you know what, dude, you just really blew it, man. Mm-hmm. And you can do whatever you're going to do to me if you're that dude, but that's wrong. That's immoral. That's terrible. Not because I'm any better.
No,
but because it's not about that. It's just, come on, man.
Yeah.
So to me, I feel like, the journey, and I think there's a lot of Bible verses that kind of you could say have this type of philosophy, like I am worried. Mm-hmm. I am happy. I am, what are you? Because that's what you're reflecting. This I am is an important aspect, but it doesn't have to be outside of you. It's here. What are you? Who are you building? And that journey to me is the spiritual journey. That's the journey, right? Working out your kinks, becoming the healthiest you that you can be for your community, for your, the loved ones, people around you. That I work at all the time.
Yeah.
And fail at all the time.
But get up and do it again.
And you just get up and do it again because that is what we do, So I kind of see life about that, and, the way music to me is, for whatever reasons, because you can make some pretty good cases, I think, for the psychological origins of music in mm-hmm. folks. There's a lot of us that are part of music that grew up with very hurting, difficult situations, and music is the way that we express all this. It's the way that we work it out. It's that that sanctuary. Yeah. And so, I feel like music is that for me, and there are people that I put this music out for, and they connect to it. And they find that same thing, and if it can be healing for them, if it can take them to another place for a moment, if it can relieve some pain, if it can give some hope, if it can cause them to ask questions that they need to ask that maybe they haven't been asking.
Yeah.
Subconscious wants to.
Yeah.
Maybe music can open up that door to the subconscious, and they can have that connection.
We've all seen it happen repeatedly.
Yes.
So that's to continue.
That's where it fits for me. It is. I don't want to say that it's necessarily my religion mm-hmm. per se. It's my life. Yeah. It's literally the water.
Yeah.
That I need.
Oxygen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well put.
Today's episode of Why Music Matters is sponsored by Buffalo Spree Magazine. For the past 60 years, Buffalo Spree has been Western New York's guide to living, dining, and entertainment. Every issue helps readers take advantage of the best of Western New York. Whether it's celebrating the exciting changes in our community, introducing you to people you should know, or giving you a taste of what's new on the food and dining scene, Spree has got you covered. Since the beginning, Spree has been a champion of Western New York's arts community, keeping you up to date on what's on stage, on view, and in the clubs and concert halls. Pick up the latest issue to get a closer look, or visit buffalospree.com. If you subscribe with the code JEFFSENTME, you'll get a year of Spree and a free digital edition for just $10. Look for Buffalo Spree's annual Best of Western New York issue, out on stands in late June.
You know, for me personally, let's say over the past 7 or 8 years, when divisiveness became endemic and paramount, and this isn't new,
Right.
but what made it new, I think, was the just the absolute everywhere all at onceness of social media, where it became really very easy and reflexive for people, many people, to indulge in their worst selves without thought. It's been a crazy time for all of us, right? And I think we've all had to do a lot of growing if we chose to engage with, you know, the betterment of our spiritual selves, right?
Yeah.
This is long-winded, but I have a point. I found myself needing to step away and to make this sounds antithetical to what we've been talking about, but to make my focus smaller. In other words, what can I do in my immediate community?
Yeah.
Let me get a step away from this noise, which is definitely coming in here and then just spinning around in here and making me unhealthy. And I'm not changing anything. I'm just spinning.
Yeah.
But then to find a way, a small thing, just in your immediate community where you feel like I'm doing my small bit to, if at all possible, leave the situation at least no worse than I found it, but maybe even improve it a little. Can you relate to that idea at all, and this idea of maybe stepping away from the huge broad focus to go back to a smaller one to remind ourselves of what really matters, you know?
Well, I think for me, you know, yes, and that does make sense to me. And for me, it's those, it's like the solo gig and at the dive bar that no one's quite paying attention to except for these 3 people that are at this one table. And that's, to me, I don't care how many people I play for, because we've got a really cool story. We were playing in Flagstaff on maybe our second tour out west, and it was during the Flagstaff Blues and Roots Festival. And we're playing right on Route 69, and there was a little bar there called State Bar that's no longer there. And we were the house band during the festival. So, you know, that
we played for everyone.
The bar owner just kind of took us in and let us play there for the whole weekend. So as people left the festival and they wanted to hang out at night, we were there. But we also did a brunch on Sunday. And this place only could hold like 35, 40 people tops for the brunch. And it sold out. And we were there, and we just did what we do. And this guy gets up and he goes, "Can I say something at the end?" And it always makes you nervous, right?
Yeah.
And
I think so.
Where's this going to go? And he goes, "These guys just played for us like we were 4,000.
Yeah. Right.
And I've never forgotten that. And it's nothing that I have to like remind myself to do. It's just who I am and the guys that I play with, who we are. So those little moments for me where you can touch somebody simply. It's not about going on tour. It's not about hoping that a bunch of people buy your album. It's, you know, what you can do on social media to garner attention, which drives me crazy.
I hate it. I struggle with it.
You know, if there was an anonymous way to really do this, I would love it. You know,
I'd be right there with you.
You know, but
I hate me.
Oh gosh, that's what it always feels like.
Yep.
You know, look at me.
Come
It's
to my
like,
gig,
you
do
know,
this.
Right, I know. So there's absolutely that.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, right now, from a community standpoint, I do feel a little bit disconnected, like even in my own community, because there's so much, because of the way the music business is, there's so much of your time and energy that are just sucked out to try to book, promote, you know, do all the logistics. You know, I do have some booking help now with Lavender Haze Collective and Ellen, who's great. So she's starting to help, and that, you know, that does alleviate some of that, you know, but I'm still doing a lot. And you know, in the process of doing this record was so time consuming because it was a learning curve, working on solo records as well right now. So there's not a lot of time outside of the music biz. So that's usually family.
Yeah.
You know,
Needs to be.
yeah. So, you know, Laura and I drove across the bridge the other night and went to Ming Tay in Fort Erie, had great Chinese food, thanks to Anita West, who took us to that place to show us.
Shout out to Anita.
Yeah.
Legend.
So, you know, or going up to see the kids in Maine, or them coming down, or, you know, whatever. It tends to be more around that.
Yeah.
So I do feel a little, you know, disconnected in that sense from, you know, where you can kind of be human and not be a musician. But because the music is this way that I work, I let it do its thing.
Yeah.
I go and play those gigs and let that be my moment in that place, you know, in that little small joint or on that back porch or whatever it happens to be, and just do the work there.
Yeah.
You know,
That makes sense. About a month ago, you celebrated the release of this album with a show at the Sportsman's Tavern. And this was special.
it's cool.
It's
a cool night.
And what made it so special was not just the strength of the music and the performance of the band, which, you know, are on their own are just mind-blowing. It was the way that what you're talking about was just totally made manifest, and this feeling of, like, you know, the one we all live for, where you're looking at somebody who's a stranger who you might not agree with on very much, and you just want to hug them. Why? Because you're experiencing together something that is emotionally profound and is about unity, you know, and togetherness. That's a tall order. You can't just summon that, but it is inherent in what you do, and I really felt it that night, and I know I'm not alone because I talked to a lot of people there. That was special, and I do feel that, you know, music consumes your life. It does mine too, and you have to try this balance. But if that's what music is doing, you are fulfilling that mandate because you're spreading something that can take root, that plants seeds, and I think does eventually grow into making your community better. These shared experiences that elevate us, I think, can in the long term do good in a broader sense. It's very hippy-dippy, but it's true, too.
I think it's unbelievably true. I know that I was thinking this morning how, you know, we talk about the lack of critical thinking, especially right now with the dialogue online and people just making bold statements but having nothing to back it, right? But you know what else I think we lack? Creativity.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because there has been such a dissection and suffocation of, you know, music and art and things like that, because in that you find that expression and creativity. You find another angle. You know, you're in photography class, you're trying to find a different way of looking at something, right? I mean, there's all those things that, you know, in music, you're interpreting it because no matter what, even if you're just playing the notes, you know, it's still going to be that way that you played it once.
Yeah.
It's never going to be twice.
Yeah.
You know?
I like that.
So there's always that. And when you take that away, you know, so people in their life, they just can't see another way. They can't look at another perspective because they just lack the creativity, you know, to do so.
To think and create their way out of it, right?
Yeah, or just to imagine,
Yeah,
right?
imagine
Imagine what somebody else is going through.
Yeah.
Forget about the, even if you don't have the empathy. Let's say you don't have that. How about just the imagination? Just to imagine another scenario where the world wasn't the way that you grew. The world for somebody else wasn't the one that you grew up in. I mean, I grew up in small towns, and for the most part, my graduating class was like 60.
Yeah, mine too.
So, and that a lot of people that I know from that small town have a very, very narrow view of the world. For a million different reasons, I don't. And I think, ultimately it wasn't that we traveled the world or this and that. I think it was because of creativity.
Yeah.
I think the whole creative world opened myself up to seeing, just writing a song, is creating this fiction.
Yeah.
So you have to
populating it, right?
So
you're
you're
imagining other
you're
worlds,
going into this other place, right? And looking at a perspective. I've got a song that's going on my solo record. It's called "Today Is the Day," and Laura and I were driving up through the hills of southern Pennsylvania over to Virginia, and it was super late, at night,
windy roads. And
I'd done a show, and then we were literally going as far as we could until I just couldn't stay awake anymore, grabbing a hotel and going the rest of the way. And we came up over this ridge, and I was just in this Appalachian vibe, and I heard, "Sally's got a bullet in her pocket. Where'd she go and get that from?" And I'm like, yeah, where did she go and get that from? And all of a sudden, I had to find out about Sally, what her situation was.
You had a window, yeah.
And that's what creativity can do, right? All of a sudden, I'm in a different world, understanding a different perspective, imagining a different perspective. We're missing that. So I think, that's where we kind of disconnect. Yeah. So where music can help hopefully do, and telling these stories is helping someone go to that place in they don't have to do it by themselves. They're not alone. They've got a friend who's kind of walking with them into this space that they haven't been in yet,
But they're a guide in a way, right?
You're just kind of there with them, and then they can feel more comfortable in exploring this idea that's in front of them. And I feel very important. Like, that's a very important thing for me to do.
Yeah.
I need to do that. That's self-fulfilling, and it's giving, and it checks the boxes, So
it's noble work, in my opinion. It is.
It's the only work that I can do well.
This leads, I think, to the songs on this record, which talk about imagining the situations of others, maybe even strangers, with an eye toward empathy. I really get that vibe from Thieves and the Breadline. It's honest. It looks at things through a non-judgmental eye, I feel, a kind of reporter's eye in a lot of way. Yet we can also hear your passion. Like, you care about these people, right?
Yeah, I do.
All your records have had that to a certain degree, I think, but this one really feels like a fulfillment of that idea. Is it because of the time it was during which it was made? Is this just where your evolution was at when you took the snapshot?
I think so, because like Poison Sipped was completely me dumping. I mean, I had to do that album to live.
Yeah.
Because I was talking about very personal, deep personal struggles and things, and where I was climbing out of that, right? And Same Soil was kind of like a promoter. It was more of a promoter goes, if you give me a good blues Americana record, I could really make that work. And I was like, well, I got some stuff, and threw it down. But, not that it doesn't have some cool songs in there too, but
it definitely does.
It was a little bit more Legoed together, not from a kit. It's just like, I got these parts. And Rise was, I think, a transition, because I still didn't have a band.
Yeah.
I had great players.
You're right.
And there were a lot of sinners, that I could call upon.
It was a collective that you drew from.
Yeah. But this was we've got a band now.
Yeah.
And so that was an ingredient. And just listening to my bandmates, you know, my drummer, who I met because of you at your birthday party, jamming with your son. Yeah. And I'm like, this kid is something else. He is amazing.
Isaiah
Can
Griffin.
I get your number?
Yeah.
And yeah, got Isaiah's number. And, but listening
just a beautiful soul.
Oh,
I'm going to editorialize a little.
Please.
I love him dearly.
Please. I mean, he's such a unique young man, and he's unbelievably gifted. He's one of those dudes that can figure out anything you give him to figure out. He'll figure it out, and become really good at it. But I also listened to him tell the stories of growing up, and where he grew up, and how he grew up, and what his neighborhood's like, and listening to the different experience of these guys that I've been, you know, driving to gigs with, week after week after week. So I think there's a lot of that. It's definitely a reflection of these times, which I feel like, you know, I was just watching the first episode of the Stax documentary, which I'm a massive Stax fanatic. And whenever I go to Memphis, I shouldn't say whenever, but almost every trip that I go to Memphis, I take the band there, especially if I have new guys.
Hallowed ground.
I want them to, you know, because I literally wept the first time I went through Stax. You know, it feels like we're on repeat. Everything old is new again, not in a good way, you know, kind of a thing, right? You know, we're dealing with some of the same, you know, issues that are driven by fear and, you know, and
finger pointing.
Yeah.
Blame the other.
Which is all, you know, being self-conscious. You know, that comes from not feeling good about yourself and being afraid of the world and all these horrible things that construct these viewpoints. So, you know, there's songs on here that were absolutely us. We're not so internal. It's like us. We're talking about us because it's the band. It's us. And then we're talking to you, us. Let's us have a conversation. And when we're having an us conversation, it's not just about Dave talking about, you know, how he felt about
Dave's
the
World.
edge of the end of the world, or Carolina Bound, or all these other tunes. We're talking about Thieves in the Breadline. We're talking about Uneven. You know, we're talking about Only Seven. You know, and Street Child, and drawing attention to some pictures and some things to, you know, kind of get people, and ultimately better times, better days, because you know, like I say at the live show, you know, I don't look to the past to see the good stuff. I'm this nihilistic pessimist, or optimist. Sorry, nihilistic optimist, or optimistic and nihilist, and let's create out of nothing some meaning, and let that meaning be amazing. Let's put the better times in front of us, and let's make those. You know, let's make those
aspire to them.
Yes,
create
absolutely.
a dream to reach to.
Because I think that's, at the end of the day, that's what we have.
Yeah,
that is what we have. And I mean, that's my own personal philosophy: is you create this life, you know, and you can do crappy things with it. I almost used another word, but I want to keep this PG for the kids. You know, so why not? And that actually comes from a conversation mainly with the whiskey maker from 3-Chord Bourbon.
Yeah.
Ari Sussman. He and I were sitting there and we were talking about the name of my band. And he's like, so where did that come from? And I'm telling him, you know, my background and how I just, you know, Miller and the Other Sinners means like me and everybody, we're all broken. We're all trying to figure this out together. None of us have got it. You know, it's just us, you know. And you know, in the conversation, you know, he ended up getting around to, well, since really nothing means anything, you know, there's really no inherent meaning in the universe, in his opinion. He goes, let's create meaning.
Yeah.
He goes, Dave, he goes, I mean, he looked at me right in the eye and he goes, Dave, let's do the coolest stuff. Let's dream like crazy big dreams that shouldn't be able to happen, and let's make them happen. And it was just so,
existentialism, man.
Oh
I mean, that's a belief.
I walked away from that, and that just echoed, and still does. It echoed heavy in my head for a good year, and still I come back to it. And this was kind of a step towards that, you know, in a lot of different ways, you know, like getting the studio going and learning how to engineer and learning how to mix, learning how to master, to some sort of level that I didn't discuss myself.
Yeah.
And that, you know what I mean? That I could be like, okay, all right. You know, that's passable. You know, it's not the whatever that we all have as musicians, right?
Totally.
The nirvana
Oh, yeah.
of whatever we're trying to achieve, and we're, you know, like it's not quite there. But yeah, let's do something. Let's bring people to some really cool place, you know, however we can, you know.
So you talked about at the core of your band, and this is not excluding anyone, but at the core of your band, it's a trio of yourself, Isaiah Griffin, and Steve Davis.
Yeah.
Profoundly gifted musicians.
Incredible.
With a sum total of life experience and musical experience that is, you know, is a deep well.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing Steve, you know, we've known predominantly as just a super gifted keyboardist, playing bass with his left hand when you guys are operating as a trio.
I know.
And realizing how filthy funky it is and amazing.
Yeah.
And the way you three are playing off each other.
Yeah.
You've always worked with great musicians and had great bands.
I've been
but
very fortunate.
Yeah, you have. You definitely have. This is special. You know, this is seems like a next level thing.
It's been, you know, 4.5 years with these guys, and working towards 5 here. And so we're kind of, you know, past I wonder kind of what he might do next. Not that I don't still get like these amazing, thrilling moments of whoa, you know, but the whoa was still kind of like I knew a whoa was coming. You know what I mean? It wasn't, it's like he's going to do something amazing, and there it is, you know. But Steve and Isaiah are not only incredibly amazing musicians, and I think Steve is probably, honestly, one of the most all-around talented musicians I've ever been in the presence of.
And that's saying a lot, knowing who you've played with.
But they're just really, really wonderful people to work with.
Yeah.
They're humble. They have big hearts. They're understanding. They're respectful. You know, they respect the work. You know, they come to it professionally. Yeah. You know, but they can be lighthearted. You know, they're great to tour with. You know, when we have to get on the road. You know, sometimes you work with great musicians, and the road is difficult for them.
Right.
You know, because it's hard.
It's super hard at whatever level you're at.
Yeah.
It's hard.
You know, crammed into a vehicle. There's no me time sometimes. You know, you're in a hotel room with somebody.
Yep.
No me time. You know, you want to make a phone call, and you got to walk outside to make a phone call. Oh, in the winter, you know, or whatever, right? I mean,
Right.
it's just inconvenient all the way around. And then you drive all the way to New Mexico and play a little joint for like 15 people, you know, because it's your first time there and no one knows who you are. And so
you got to build it.
You did all of that work, and now you're like, oh, you know, because that happens sometimes.
And I'm a long way from home.
And you're a long way from home, and you're eating strange food, and all of it, right? These guys have just been so amazing to work with. I mean, I think the biggest test of that was probably our last big run, you know, a year and a half back or whatever, when the van axle broke as we were driving up out of Albuquerque. And so we ended up having to be there an extra day, and then we had to rent a car, and 2 of the guys had to drive that. Well, we rented a minivan and U-Haul van and loaded the stuff in there and left the van, you know, so we could get everybody home. And everybody was just like, "It's cool, man. We got it." You know, it wasn't like, oh, you know.
Those are the kind of people you want to ride the raft with. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, Dalton and I coming up through Ohio right after hurricanes had whipped through, and everything's torn down and closed. We can't get gas. We're like on fumes trying to find an open gas station because, you know, and we can laugh about it. We weren't even freaking out that much at the time, and we should have been probably more, but you know, we were just working it out, you know. So the core is really, really solid with those 3. And then, you know, Dalton started playing with us before COVID.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were kind of working with Kevin Hall, who's amazing, and Dalton too. And both amazing human beings. Dalton just kind of fit the vibe, I think, of a band as a whole.
Yeah, he brings something.
And he plays with a number of acts. It's not like we're the only, you know, band that he plays with, but I know that we get a lot of his attention. I'm very appreciative of that. and then we had worked with Paul Gaspar out of Fairport on trumpet, who's just an incredible trumpet player. He had done some subbing when Jim Boehm was playing with us. He had done some subbing, and then helped us do some stuff on the record, helped us with some arrangements, played on Rise, some of the Rise songs. And then it just seemed like, we just really needed a guy like that, And so he came in, and the two of them are just work so incredibly well together. And it's hilarious because, you got this, tall, nearly translucent white trumpet player, next to Dalton, and they're just
so simpatico.
Oh, and they play off each other so well and encourage each other on stage, and it's beautiful to see. So they do, 98, 99% of the shows, every once in a while I got to get a sub, but
because people are busy,
because people have things come up. Yeah.
Well, it's a pretty special band, man. What's going on for the rest of the summer? I know you mentioned you're working on, a solo record.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, because I've got there's close to 40 tunes that are being recorded, And
you're doing this at home.
I'm doing this at home, and I'm trying to do most of it myself, just completely myself, because it's kind of an Americana singer-songwriter kind of thing, stuff that isn't necessarily the vibe, because I just write, and the songs are what the songs are,
right?
And so I've got some of that stuff that I'm working on, and I'm trying to figure out kind of how to present it. I don't know yet. I was thinking maybe a series of volumes or something, just like release. I'm not sure, but
a bunch of EPs or
something like that. Just you could kind of get a little collection of these, and maybe thematically, or I don't know. I've got a bunch of songs that are about my family, grandparents and different things that are like takes on who they are, and I don't know. So we'll see. But working on that. But we've got a busy summer of gigs. I mean, we've got 3 5-piece band gigs this week, starting off on Thursday with your series.
Very excited.
So that's going to be, I'm so excited to play by the water. I love gigs where you're near water. And to me,
it's so amazing to me that there's not more of that in Buffalo. Like,
considering that we're right on the lake.
What we have right there, it's kind of wild.
I know.
There are places, but there's something special about that.
Absolutely. I love it. Anytime. We usually play quite a few gigs off of Seneca Lake. Yeah. Every summer, and I know our last one was at Grist Iron, and literally my view, as I looked past the people, was Seneca Lake. I mean, in the background, it's just very, inspirational.
Oh, it can't help but be. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we've got, we got some, we're doing a gig this week with Joe Beard, who is one of the, last of a generation of legacy bluesmen. And we get a chance to open and then jam with him.
How cool is that?
I never say no to that. Next week, we're going to be opening up for Los Lonely Boys at the Rochester Jazz Festival, down on Parcel 5. So, that's going to be a huge event. And then we got a bunch of festivals. Estival Festival is this coming weekend as well, which is such a emerging Woodstocky, vibey fest. Great stage, unbelievable food. Like, the food at this place is crazy good. So we're gonna, so we got a bunch of other festivals: Cornhill Festival, Red, White, and Blues Festival, Fairport Music Festival. We got a bunch of stuff lined up for the summer. So and a vacation to see the kids in Maine in there too.
Good. What part of Maine?
So my oldest son, which is kind of where we're going to be near, because we're renting a house on a lake near him, is Otisfield, which is like, they call it like camp country. It's a bunch of lakes. And he literally lives just a few miles from a couple different lakes, and we're renting a house off of one of those. My other son lives closer to Portland, so he's about 40 minutes away from there.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a great area.
Well, considering that schedule, I'd like to wrap up somewhere near where we started, which is none of this stuff, gets easier as time goes by. And yet your commitment to it, if anything, is just deepening and crystallizing, as time goes by. Why? There are days, I know you have them too, where I'm like, pardon me, yeah, I should have listened to my mother and been a teacher or whatever it might be. Like, oh my God, why do I do this to myself every time and put myself through it? And I'm not even going on the road anymore. So I can imagine that, you know, there are times when, and I'm sure you have this conversation with Laura many times over the years. Why are we doing this to ourselves? Why does it continue to matter?
Yeah.
So why does it?
So I think there's a couple parts to the answer to that. One is, one of my fatal flaws and assets is stubbornness. Mm. I'm stubborn. And anybody that's worked with me over any period of time, you're going to know that. I'll own it. I'll certainly try to come to that stubbornness with reasons, you know, and back it up with something versus just being stubborn for the sake of being stubborn. But that is at the core of this. I mean, but I think the reasons that drive that stubbornness, which is the other part for me, is these songs to me are, you know, it's weird to know how to describe where they come from. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily feel like they're gifted from something else, but maybe from this collective consciousness and experience of being human that's, you know, that we're pulling these from, you know, whatever. But there's songs that, these are stories that should be told. And I battle that thought all the time, because it's like, well, what makes these stories so important? You know, that's, you know, listening to that Stax Records thing. It's like, what can you add? You know, what note could you record that's better than anything that was done there? You know, whatever, right? Or that could add to it. Maybe not better than, but, you know, could add to it.
Yeah.
And, but because we're all of us, all the time, are creating these lives which are fictions. You know, our interpretation of our own life is a fiction. My interpretation of you, as well as I can know you, is still fiction. It's not really you. It's just as best as I can get to, you know what I mean? So there's room. Yeah. There's room for more fiction, because that is literally the fabric of our reality.
Yeah, and how we connect.
How we connect to everything, you know, each other, our very life, you know, this world. So I feel like as long as these songs are coming, and you know, part of the process of learning how to really record them was so that moving forward, there's nothing other than my own laziness or apathy at times, or
you're
tiredness
lazy,
or time.
You're really lazy.
Well, you know, at times, you know, that's the only thing that's going to get in the way.
Right.
And I need to get these stories out there, regardless of what they do. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. That's
just
not
get them
point.
out there. Get them out there. And I did a little solo show at Fanatics Pub.
Yeah.
Sunday during Father's Day, and there's a lady who's from the Blues Society, Franny. She came out and she brought her sister, and I did a song that she just really connected to, and she came up almost in tears, hugging me and just saying, I just felt that all the way through, and it's that. It's that. So that's why music matters to me, because that's the bones of it. You know, like I said before, it's the water. Got it. You know, it's just so that, you know, the stubbornness comes from there.
Yeah. Again, that's noble, man. Thank you so much for being here. For people who haven't listened to Thieves and the Breadline yet, please do. Streaming,
please,
everywhere.
Yeah.
If you want to take it a step beyond streaming, if you're a fanatic like me, I like to listen to things on vinyl as well as streaming. But there's beautifully packaged colored vinyl here with amazing artwork. The choice is yours, and they can go to your website.
Yep, they go to our website, millerandtheothersinners.com. You can pick it up at one of our shows, which would even be better.
Yeah.
We'd love to.
Then we can talk.
Yeah. Love to say hi and yeah, all that.
Right on. Well, thank you for your time, brother.
Course,
it is
man.
Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Love you, bro.
And I learned even more about you.
Yeah, that's could be good and bad.
It's good. It's good. Thanks for being here, man.
Sure thing. Thank you.